Have you ever wondered why your blood sugar rises even when you believe you're eating healthily? You cut out sweets, avoid soda, choose natural options, and yet you still see unexpected numbers on your glucose meter. If this has happened to you, know that you're not alone. Many people living with diabetes or prediabetes consume foods that diabetics think are healthy, but which, in practice, end up sabotaging glycemic control. In this video, we're going to talk about, say, natural foods that raise blood sugar and go unnoticed in everyday life. They are common choices, often recommended as part of a balanced diet, but which act as foods that silently raise glucose. What you're about to discover may surprise you, especially if you've been striving to maintain a proper eating routine and still face blood sugar spikes. Living with diabetes requires constant attention, and that's tiring. Reading labels, following guidelines, trying to practice a healthy diet for diabetics, and still dealing with frustrating results generates insecurity and discouragement. Many people start to think they are making mistakes in their diabetes diet when, in fact, the problem lies in foods with hidden sugars for diabetics, present even in products considered natural. Have you ever experienced this? That feeling of doing everything right and yet seeing your glucose rise without explanation? The purpose of this content is to bring clarity. We will show how some foods that rapidly raise blood sugar act in the body, why certain items are considered the worst foods for glycemic control, and how these dietary mistakes happen without the person realizing it. Many of these products are classic examples of healthy foods that are bad for diabetes, precisely because of how they affect the glycemic response. Everything you will hear here is based on principles of diabetes education, diabetes nutrition, and patterns observed by healthcare professionals when dealing with foods that worsen diabetes. This knowledge is essential for anyone seeking to control blood sugar naturally. Avoid foods that raise glucose levels and reduce risks associated with insulin resistance. Small choices repeated every day have a huge impact on managing the disease. Throughout this video, you will see how many nutritional mistakes in diabetes arise precisely from the best intentions. Foods promoted as natural, light, or balanced end up becoming foods that diabetics should avoid. Not because they are bad in themselves, but because they don't work well for those who need glycemic control. Understanding this completely changes the way you look at your diet and strengthens your awareness of diabetes. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next can transform the way you see your plate. Observe your habits, reflect on your choices, and prepare to identify patterns that may be going unnoticed. This is the basis for smarter decisions, more confidence in your daily life, and a clearer path to blood sugar control as we move on to the next part. And before moving on, let me tell you something important. If everything we've been talking about so far makes sense to you, if at any point you thought this happens to me, take the opportunity to leave a comment below, telling us about your experience. Sometimes, writing about what we experience helps not only those who are watching, but also other people who are going through the same difficulty and feel alone. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to better understand diabetes, glucose control, and common dietary mistakes. If this content is helping you see food in a different way, like the video, because that shows YouTube that this message needs to reach more people. And if you want to continue learning about foods that raise blood sugar, foods that diabetics think are healthy, and how to avoid choices that sabotage treatment, subscribe to the channel and stay with me here. Now, let's start the list in a very clear and practical way, because the first food often deceives many people. Dried fruits seem like a natural, healthy option, and are even recommended in many diets, but they are a classic example of natural foods that raise blood sugar. When the fruit loses water in the drying process, the sugar becomes extremely concentrated. This means that a small portion already contains a large amount of rapidly absorbed carbohydrates, causing almost immediate spikes in blood sugar. Many people with diabetes consume dried fruits thinking they are making a safe choice, when in practice they are ingesting one of the foods that silently raise glucose. Raisins, dried apricots, dates, and prunes are common examples of foods that increase glucose levels, even in quantities that seem small. This is one of the biggest mistakes in a diabetes diet. Because the food is natural, it comes from the fruit. But the impact on the body is completely different from fresh fruit. For those seeking to control blood sugar naturally, understanding this detail makes all the difference, since dried fruits easily become part of the routine as quick snacks, but end up becoming foods that worsen diabetes when consumed unconsciously. And that's just the beginning, because there are other foods considered natural that work exactly the same way in the body, and that's what we'll continue talking about from now on. Following this same logic, we come to another food that often generates a lot of doubt and, at the same time, many unexpected glycemic spikes: natural juices. Many people believe that, because they are made with fresh fruit and without added sugar, they are automatically a safe choice for those with diabetes. But the reality is quite different. Natural juices are one of the most common examples of natural foods that raise blood sugar, precisely because they concentrate the fruit's sugar and eliminate something essential for glycemic control: fiber. When you blend or squeeze the fruit to make juice, most of the fiber is lost. This fiber is responsible for slowing down the absorption of sugar in the body. Without it, fructose quickly enters the bloodstream, causing almost immediate spikes in blood sugar. That's why natural juices fit perfectly into the category of foods that raise glucose silently, even when they seem healthy and homemade. A glass of orange juice, for example, can contain the sugar of 3 or 4 fruits consumed at once, something that hardly anyone would eat in solid form. This is one of the biggest mistakes in the diet for diabetes, and also one of the most common nutritional errors among people seeking to control their blood sugar naturally. Juice seems light, refreshing, and nutritious, but it acts in the body as one of the foods that increase glucose levels most quickly. For those living with diabetes or prediabetes, understanding this completely changes the way they view these drinks. Even without added sugar, natural juices are on the list of foods that diabetics should avoid or, at least, consume with extreme caution. They are clear examples of foods that worsen diabetes when they are part of the routine, especially on an empty stomach or between meals. And as we move down the list, you will realize that this pattern is repeated in other foods considered good. Another very common myth when we talk about food and diabetes involves honey and so-called natural sweeteners, because they are extracted from nature and often associated with an image of healthier food. Many people believe that honey, coconut sugar, molasses, and similar products are safe options to replace regular sugar. But in practice, these products are among the natural foods that raise blood sugar directly and quickly. The body doesn't differentiate whether the sugar comes from honey, brown sugar, or refined sugar. Once ingested, they all glucose and pack bloodstream. That's why honey and natural sweeteners easily make it onto the list of foods that silently raise glucose, especially when consumed frequently. This is one of the most common mistakes in a diabetes diet, because the natural label creates a false sense of security. Many people with diabetes use honey in their coffee, tea, or homemade recipes, believing they are making a better choice when, in fact, they are consuming foods that raise glucose levels in almost the same way as traditional sugar, coconut sugar, molasses, and natural syrups also fall into the category of foods that worsen diabetes, contributing to blood sugar spikes and making it difficult to control blood sugar throughout the day for those seeking to control their blood sugar naturally. Understanding this point is crucial. These products are clear examples of foods that diabetics think are healthy, but end up sabotaging their results. They are part of that group of foods that diabetics should avoid, not because they are artificial, but precisely because they have a direct and intense impact on blood glucose. And as we continue, you will realize that other natural foods work in a very similar way within the body. Now, we come to a point that confuses many people. Industrially produced whole wheat breads and pastas. They are often seen as smart choices for people with diabetes, precisely because they carry words like whole grain, multigrain, or high in fiber on their labels. But, in practice, many of these products are natural foods that raise blood sugar in almost the same way as traditional white versions. The big problem lies in the composition. In many cases, the base of these brew pastas and flour, with a small amount of whole grains added only to justify the label. This makes them foods that silently raise glucose, causing blood sugar spikes shortly after consumption. This is one of the most frequent mistakes in a diabetic diet, because the consumer trusts the packaging without analyzing the real impact of the food on the body. For those living with diabetes or prediabetes, these products easily make it onto the list of foods that diabetics think are healthy, but which, in fact, act as foods that rapidly increase glucose levels. They also fall into the category of foods that worsen diabetes, especially when they are part of the daily routine at breakfast or main meals. Understanding this difference is essential for those seeking to control blood sugar naturally and avoid choices that sabotage treatment. Many industrially produced whole wheat breads and pastas are classic examples of foods that diabetics should avoid, not because the concept of whole wheat is bad, but because the industrialized version does not always deliver what it promises. And as we move down the list, it becomes increasingly clear how marketing can mask foods that are harmful to glycemic control. And if you've made it this far, that already says a lot about you. It shows that you're truly interested in understanding your body, taking care of your health, and not accepting superficial information when it comes to diabetes. This kind of attention really makes a difference in glucose control over time. If everything you've heard so far has made sense, take this moment and leave a comment below, saying what caught your attention the most, or which of these foods you used to eat thinking it was a good choice. Your experience can help other people who are going through the exact same challenge. If this content is helping you see food in a clearer and more conscious way, like the video. This simple gesture shows YouTube that this type of information needs to reach more people living with diabetes. And if you want to continue learning about food choices, daily habits, and smarter ways to control blood sugar, subscribe to the channel and follow along. There's still a lot of important stuff for us to talk about, and what comes next may further change the way you look at your plate. Now, pay attention to this point, because many people fall into this trap without realizing it. Cereal bars and natural snacks are seen as healthy options, but in practice, they are among the foods that silently raise glucose levels. They are sold as practical, fitness, and natural. But when we analyze the labels, we find disguised sugar, syrups, honey, maltodextrin, and rapidly absorbed carbohydrates. All of this causes these products to trigger spikes in blood sugar, even when consumed in small quantities. The big problem is that, because they seem harmless, these snacks end up becoming part of the daily routine, especially as snacks between meals. And here is one of the most common mistakes in the diet of those with diabetes: believing that they are making a good choice when, in fact, they are making it harder to control glucose. These foods quickly enter the bloodstream, raise blood sugar in a short time, and disrupt the entire glycemic balance. And the most dangerous thing is that many diabetics consume these products thinking they are taking care of their health without realizing the real impact they cause. If you've had, is cheeky with me, because the next food on the list is often found on many people's tables and also carries a risk that almost no one talks about. Warning about sauces, jams, pastes, and natural products that hide sugar under different names on the labels. And now we come to the most important point of all, the one that completely changes the way you see food in diabetes. Natural foods in excess. Yes, even what is considered healthy can become a serious problem when consumed without balance. This is one of the biggest diabetes diet mistakes, and also one of the most difficult to notice. Many people believe that because they are natural, these foods pose no risk. But the reality is that they're unnatural. Foods that raise blood sugar when the quantity gets out of control. Fruits, roots, grains, nuts, and even some whole foods, when consumed in large portions or in isolation, can become foods that spike blood sugar. The body does not evaluate whether the food is natural or processed. It responds to the glucose, LOAD, that arrives all at once. Without the proper combination of fiber, good fats, and proteins, these foods quickly become foods that secretly raise blood sugar, even in those who believe they are doing everything right. This mistake is even more common in people with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, who follow generic healthy eating guidelines, but not adapted to their reality. That's why so many foods that diabetics think are healthy end up on the list of diabetes foods to avoid, when the goal is to maintain blood glucose control. Excess, combined with a lack of strategy, creates constant spikes, metabolic wear and tear, and the frustrating feeling that glucose never stabilizes. What really makes the difference is not cutting everything out, but understanding quantity, combination, and frequency. When this is not respected, even so-called healthy foods that are bad for diabetes start to raise blood sugar levels, becoming the worst foods for blood sugar in that specific context. This is the final warning, and perhaps the most liberating. Controlling glucose is not about fear of food, but about awareness and balance. And it is precisely this change of perspective that can completely transform your relationship with food and diabetes. If everything you've heard so far has made sense to you, I really want to know which of these foods surprised you the most, or which one did you consume thinking it was healthy? Leave that in the comments, because your experience can help other people who are going through the exact same challenge. When you comment, you're not just talking to me. You are strengthening a community that seeks to better understand diabetes, avoid common dietary mistakes, and learn to deal with foods that silently raise blood sugar on a daily basis. Your voice here really matters. It is she who makes this content reach more people who need this information to better manage their glucose, make more conscious choices, and avoid falling into the traps of foods that seem healthy but are not. After looking closely at all these foods, a very clear pattern begins to emerge. In almost all cases, they are options that seem healthy, natural, or harmless, but that have a high impact on glucose when consumed unconsciously. The problem isn't just the food itself, but how it's presented, the amount consumed, and the mistaken idea that because it's natural or whole, it's automatically safe for people with diabetes. That's exactly where many mistakes happen in daily eating habits. Without the correct information, foods that should be consumed with caution end up becoming part of the routine, causing blood sugar spikes, making glycemic control difficult, and bringing frustration to those who feel they're doing everything right but don't see results. Understanding how these foods act in the body completely changes the way you eat. Information is protection. The more you know about the real impact of what you put on your plate, the more power you have to make conscious, balanced choices aligned with glucose control without fear, without guilt, and without falling into traps disguised as health. If this content helped you see food in a different way, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This shows YouTube that this type of information is important and allows more people living with diabetes to also have access to this knowledge. And if you were already consuming any of these foods thinking they were safe, share that here in the comments. Your experience can open the eyes of someone who is going through exactly the same challenge and hasn't yet realized where they're going wrong. And if you want to continue learning how to better control your glucose levels on a daily basis, understand what really helps and what can silently hinder you, take the opportunity to watch the next video that appears on the screen now. It complements this topic exactly and will help you take another conscious step in your diet and in caring for your health.